Um, Denise couldn't be here tonight, so she asked me to fill in. And this is my first time chairing a meeting, so patience, please. And hopefully my internet will stay with us. And what else? Let's move. So I'm just wondering if there's any members of the public with us tonight that we need. Okay, Chris. Okay, good. And any other members of the public? Just taking a roll call on other members of the public. Okay. Well, go ahead, Chris, and we'll hear your comments and then we'll move forward with our meeting minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for taking me at the beginning of the meeting as well. I think I'll try to be brief and just let you know. Recently, there's been a legislative study on the necessary changes proposed on Act 250, and there was a wide range of stakeholders that were involved with these changes. And one of the primary changes is to give a lot of the Act 250 authority to municipalities who basically can handle it. And that probably would be most of Chittenden County, which has a significant impact on development. And I didn't see that the Lake Champlain Advisory Committee or any Lake Champlain interests were on this committee at all. There were a wide range of stakeholders. I've forwarded the report to Katie, and she can perhaps forward it on to you folks who haven't seen it. And I just wanted to alert you that there's also a public hearing on this, or a public meeting on the 14th of December, which is this Wednesday, I think it is, or Thursday, that perhaps this board would be interested in. Basically, that's all. I don't know whether it's good or bad for the lake, but what Act 250 has done in the past is given a significant review of water issues through the Agency of Natural Resources. And a concern of mine is that if the agency is taken out of the equation, then the water quality from these developments in Chittenden County will go unreviewed. And I don't know whether that's an accurate portrayal, but it's a concern that it might be. And that's why I just thought I'd alert you folks of that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Can you state your last name for the record?
Yes, it's Chris Callahan, Callahan.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. And if you'll see at the end of the report, there's a long list of the people who are consulted or part of the committee, and they have their various organizations involved. I just didn't see anybody representing the interests of Lake Champlain on this committee. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. Sorry, my husband's just arriving home. Yeah.
Did Chris provide or did you provide a copy of that report, or is that report, it's public and easy to find?
Both. I sent forwarded a link to Katie.
Okay.
Yeah, Katie Dar, and it's got links and all. It's a press release from the Natural Resources Board, and you can click on the links and get the report and all kinds of other things that are attached to that. There's a bunch of links on it. And I hope that you can get them through the email I sent.
Okay. It looks like it's in our chat now. So thank you very much, both of you.
You're welcome. Yep.
Meg, do you want to put a pitch in for the meeting happening this week at the beginning of the meeting? I imagine you've got a lot going on today. So
sure.
Space.
Thanks. I just wanted everybody to know or remind you that there's a special Resources Development Act with the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's called the Section 542 program. And what it is an authorization through Congress to set aside Army Corps of Engineers assistance to do bigger projects basically in the watershed. And so the program exists for local municipalities, other groups to come in at a 35% match to get Army Corps assistance to do big projects. And really the breaking point where we find it's most reasonable to couch projects is anywhere over the $500 or $1 million mark. We've looked at some pretty significant stormwater management projects, and we've funded work on modeling phosphorus reduction in St. Albans Bay. We've done the first phase of the Champlain Canal invasive species barrier feasibility project through the fund. And we have a few other projects that we're working on. And so we have a public information session. The program is open on a rolling basis. The authorization has been increased thanks to our congressional delegation to $100 million. But what's available right now is just over about the $5 million mark. But if we get more projects queued, then there's more pressure to get more dollars. So the general information meeting will be held this Wednesday, December 13th. It's going to be a hybrid meeting, so it'll be available in person at the Gordon Center House at our offices in Grand Isle from 2 to 4 p.m. But we also have a Teams meeting link that you can join. And if you RSVP to Carrie Crowning Shield, there's a link, Katie, on our website that shows how to reply to Carrie, and if Carrie can send you the hybrid link if you can't attend in person. But generally, it's to provide an overview of what we call our general management plan, which outlines the relationship between the Lake Champlain Basin Program Steering Committee and the Army Corps of Engineers for reviewing projects. And again, we can meet with you separately if you have project ideas. This is just an opportunity to advertise the program and see if there's any project interest that might come in during that time frame. But we will accept letters of interest or other project idea meetings on a rolling basis whenever. So that's the summary. And if there's questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to attend, or if you have project ideas and you can't attend, just talk about them.
Thank you, Meg. Yeah, I saw that workshop posting and I was unfortunately I have a conflict, but I am curious how it works and looking forward to hearing more details. Do you know if it will be recorded?
We didn't plan to record it, but again, I can either ask to do that, or we will hold a whole nother session for anybody who's interested, or if you just want to meet separately and talk about it at another time. Any of that is possible. I think the program is relatively undersubscribed, and the reason why you really need larger projects is because at the 35% match, some programs or projects could achieve their project at that match amount, because Army Corps projects usually take a little longer and cost a bit more. But if there are larger projects, this is a very good source of funding. And working with the state of Vermont, we've had success in looking at state revolving fund dollars to help with that 35% match. There's also opportunities for in kind for that match. And the congressional delegation is also looking into opportunities to reduce so that the barrier to entry for local partners in the watershed might be eased in the future.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Meg?
Hi, this is Carrie. Good to see you all. Yes, I too have a conflict on Wednesday, but very interested in this. When you mentioned the SRF, I know it's a combination of federal and state dollars that support the state revolving fund. And there's always a question of whether you can use federal to leverage federal. So more information. It would be great to have another, either if you tape that one and circulate the recording, or have another meeting, that would be helpful. In particular, knowing the type of projects that would warrant this kind of funding.
Terry, I can just let you know that so the state revolving fund dollars, though federal in source, once they hit the state coffer, they're considered state dollars, which is a very fortunate opportunity for folks who are interested in using SRF funds as match. So we've worked men at the state. And so we're pretty clear on that answer. And then to answer your other question, we're looking at pretty large stormwater remediation projects in the city of Virgins right now. We are also exploring a project in Whitehall. Those were in the order of $5 to $7 million projects. That would have to come up with a local 35% match. And some of those are achieved by, having towns or cities put in bonds and having the town vote on them to see if they can get that local match. And others have looked at SRF funding or other pots of funding through state grants.
Meg, has a project gone through yet in this program, or it's that new?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Okay.
no. It's been around since 2000. We started out with some really small projects, doing some stormwater work in Lake George and South Burlington, a number of different projects. And then Senator Sanders was able to figure out a way to use some of the funding for the Waterbury Dam project. The first phase of that project came through Section 542. And then again, we're doing the Champlain Canal AIS barrier. We did a St. Albans phosphorus modeling project with the Army Corps. So we've had a number of different projects come through that are of different natures, basically. So, but the bigger ones have been, stormwater / wastewater related.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if there's enough interest at the CAC level too, Karina and Katie, we could even bring like an abbreviated presentation of the general management plan to this group so you can better understand the program. It doesn't have to be a public information system session where everybody's asking questions and basically volleying project ideas. We could just give you the background presentation on the program.
That's great. Okay. We'll put it on our list. Okay, well, moving on, if no one else has questions for Meg. We have minutes. We have lots of minutes, meeting summaries from September, October, and November to approve. And I hope you guys have all had a chance to look at those. And I don't know, Katie, do we have to do them each separately, or can we do
You
them
can
all?
do them together.
Okay. So to move that along, I would love a motion to approve the meeting, or do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Carol. Was someone able to second that motion?
I would second that motion. This is Hillary.
And then according to Denise, this is when we have discussion. So is there any discussion with the meeting minutes? And any abstentions? I'm going to abstain from, I was absent actually for 2 of those meetings. But I'm the chair, so I don't know if that matters or not right now. So I guess then we can move forward with a vote. All those in favor of approving the summary minutes for September, October, and November.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Sorry, Robert's rules. Now you ask, is anyone opposed? And then hearing
Does
none
anyone
opposed.
oppose? I'm new to this. I appreciate
I
it.
know. I'm just trying to help. Sorry.
Does anyone oppose?
Hearing none, the motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing none, the motion is passed. We have a lot of good summaries now to file away. And our next item on our agenda, and we're on schedule, so that's good, is talking about our action plan and the public meeting that we held on November 13th, which we just approved the summary minutes to. But just wanting to debrief on that and how people felt about the meeting that were able to attend. So just a minute to reflect, I guess, on that. I felt like it was a pretty successful meeting. We had good attendance. It was good to be in person and share the action plan. What did other people think?
Okay, this is Bob Fisher. I was excellent. I've been along on these meetings for a long time. That was excellent. It was right up there with some of the other things we've done. Well done. Thank you.
And I'm curious because I haven't been on the CAC very long. Have you guys done it in person before like that? Has there been a public meeting to present the action plan?
Yeah, yes, it's even happened actually at the sailing center. That
Okay.
had to be pre-COVID, I believe, but it was fairly rare. And no, that's one of the most well-attended ones I've ever seen. It was well done. Thank you, everyone.
And so following up with next steps for the action plan, we have our enabling statute requires that we present to the Vermont General Assembly. And I believe Katie will be working to schedule that in late January. And I guess what we kind of are, I think, are dependent on what works with the General Assembly as far as scheduling. But if there are, I'm interested in I guess today we're interested in finding out who is interested in being a part of that as far as presenting the action plan to the General Assembly. And I think that can be a mix of hybrid and in person. And we should probably also divide up sections. I think that's how it was done last year, but open to ideas and discussion about that. And then if there are scheduling times that absolutely don't work, we should probably note those as well. Wayne, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Karina, just quick. I think you met with Julie Moore, I think, about when we had our last meeting to go through the action plan with her. Just curious what her thoughts were, how that aligned with the governor's priorities, what she'll come out with in January, just to see if you guys got any feedback from her.
Yeah.
Where they're at.
Sorry, Wayne, you're cutting out a little bit. Was your question just how that meeting went?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just to get some feedback to see what her thoughts were on it, with the timing and how it aligns with the governor's priorities.
Yeah, so Katie and myself and Sarah were at that meeting, as well as Denise. And I think it went really well. And it was nice to have it. I think it was like a week before we presented in the public meeting. So a lot of the notes that I took from that meeting with Julie, I shared. Those were sort of like specific details, specific points in the action plan under each section. And overall, I think Julie was receptive to the plan. She supported it. She gave us some good feedback. And I don't know if we have notes, Katie, that we could share from that meeting, or if there's any other comments you or Sarah have.
Yeah, I can type up my notes from that meeting. It's mostly just the talking points that you shared. Yeah, I think it was helpful to have it. We did make some slight changes to the action plan following that meeting. One of the, we had, I don't remember what it was previously, but we had like creation or supporting the emergency response fund, and we changed that to an emergency response fund because that wasn't something that existed yet. So it was helpful to just get some of that feedback from her about whether or not it made sense to her, and sort of get some of the supporting talking points. And I think it'll be helpful to sort of keep that meeting in the future, to have it in advance of when we finalize the action plan. So it was a good start. It maybe came a little bit later than we needed it, but still right on time, really, with the official rollout of the plan.
Another thing I'm just looking back at my notes from that meeting. She was curious to learn more about the aquatic invasive species inspection station, the high profile inspection station, and was thinking like it would be good to like learn as far as like trying to identify sites of where that could be if we're recommending that. So having a meeting with VTrans or whoever and maybe learning a little bit from New York and Quebec. She also regarding public access to the lake, she mentioned there was I believe it was a Boy Scout camp. I communicated with Hillary on that had been for sale and was offered to the state Vermont Fish and Wildlife, but had been denied, or they did not have an interest at the time. They had concerns about, I think there was a lot of failing infrastructure and there was a dam that was a liability. But she also mentioned that Vermont Fish and Wildlife is working on an Otter Creek Paddlers Trail, and that is certainly a tributary to Lake Champlain in the South Lake, and something that we should probably learn more about. So those were other items that came to mind that I didn't share at the meeting. Meg.
Thanks, Karina, and thanks everyone for caring for the recommendations. I just wanted to provide a little bit more context for the roadside decontamination stations on the interstates and maybe at what we call critical control points. There is funding through the Army Corps. It's a 50-50 match for border crossing concerns regarding invasive species. And we've met with the Army Corps before and had some preliminary discussions with Vermont State and New York State about their interest and ability to meet that 50% match. And we have identified a number of locations across the border for interstate and access sites to Lake Champlain, but that would also expand across the Vermont border and look at Memphremagog and 91, as well as 89 in Lake Champlain. So we do have some preliminary sites that we've talked about. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And there may be some funding mechanism available near border crossings. That's not on the Canadian-US border. So other sites that we might consider would not be necessarily eligible. We did engage VTrans in a preliminary discussion, but we have not followed up on that.
Meg, is that something that you could present on? And maybe we've heard this and I just wasn't able to attend, but I would love to learn more about those inspection stations and who, I guess, has learned, like, have they gone through any like preliminary permit review, or is there support from VTrans and others for those locations? And like, how do we help move that forward?
Yeah, I guess I won't have the answer in real time. New York State has experience working with New York DOT on getting permits in place to get roadside inspection stations open at basically Welcome Interstate 87. And maybe some of you have seen them at the Welcome Center. The Adirondack Welcome Center has one. And they've also been working on roadside. They're not mandatory, they're voluntary inspection and decontamination sites. So there is a model out there, and then out west where it is mandatory, they do have roadside inspection decontamination sites. So I mean, if we have some examples to look to, I don't think it's so much a question of like what the infrastructure and the technology will look like, but more an issue of funding, permitting, and how it would all play out, like who's on first, who would fund the staff that are working there and maintain the site, and what would the hours of operation and the season of operation be.
I actually was traveling out west this summer with our we borrowed our friend's drift boat and we were fishing on the Snake River in Grand Teton National Park. and on the South Fork of the Snake, and we had to go through that mandatory inspection in both places. And we went online first to fill out an application, pay it, and get a sticker, and then actually pulled over with the boat and had a little conversation with the park rangers. But it was valuable and didn't take a lot of time out of our day, but something to plan for, and I appreciated it. So I think it was good. Anyone else have any comments related to that? Thanks, bye. Okay, so back to our presentation to the General Assembly. I'm just wondering if there are times that recommendations as far as timing in late January, so that we can help Katie when she's scheduling. People have conflicts that absolutely don't work, or times that may be ideal.
Hi, this is Bob Fisher. I would think for me and Wayne, the last week in January between that Sunday and Wednesday would be difficult. We'll be in Boston at a major trade event. So the 21st, I'm sorry, I don't have the calendar in front of me. The 24th-ish. Beyond that, any other time would be great. Thank you.
Does it have to be in January? Is that part of?
So that's what's in the statute, but like in the past 3 years that I've been around, it's taken place in February or in March. I think the goal of January is just trying to get it in front of folks sooner. So maybe it's a little bit more actionable.
Correct, exactly. Historically, and yes, that is the goal, to try to move it as far forward as we can. Thank you.
Senator Brock?
Just a question, is there specific legislation in the House that we're looking at? There's not in the Senate that I'm aware of. If that's the case, then the earlier the better, and to get it presented to the committees of jurisdiction, your contact needs to be with the chair of the committee, because that's the person who actually does the scheduling. I'm happy to facilitate that in the Senate, and hopefully one of our members from the House will do that there, unless there's some other way that you're thinking of presenting this. I would think in the Senate it would go to the chair of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, Senator Bray.
Historically,
yeah, that's generally been my perspective.
Yeah. And the second question is, if there is not a specific bill then that you're looking at, then either A, there's a committee bill, which is maybe somewhat more difficult, or there are other bills that are pending in which pieces of the things that we want to do can be added as amendments or different items to it. And that's, again, something we can discuss offline. In other words, what's typically happened in the past is there's been a presentation to the committees, and the committees say thank you and then go on to the next item on the agenda, and not much gets done. If you want to get something done, you have to have an outline of what it is that you want that can be translated into legislative language. And at this stage, since legislation in the second half of a biennium is limited as to when it can be introduced, if it's not a committee bill, and that time basically has passed. So introducing a new bill from one of us or a friendly member is unlikely to happen this year. But you can deal with the committees, and the committees can do things that might be worthwhile. Second piece is there's some things here that are appropriations, and those would be handled a little bit differently. But the key is to get the committee of jurisdiction interested in moving forward.
Those are great points, Senator. Thank you. Does anyone else have thoughts on our presentation?
I'm sorry, this is Bob Fisher, and I lost connectivity, so I lost the end of Senator Bray's, what he was speaking. He was clearly spot on. Exactly. That's exactly 100% the history of how it works. And we are on the biennium. And once again, we write actionable items is what we generally hear from the legislature, actionable items. So I can obviously we'll continue to work on this conversation and present our items, but we'll continue to, as we have been, more reactive and look at what is coming up. And we're certainly open for any, at least I'm open for any suggestions, and highly appreciate the great guidance we have more recently received. I don't want to say this, that we have received from the that we've received from the legislative members of this committee that have been very engaged. Thank you.
Yeah. At this stage, one of the things I would suggest that we do is we should have, we clearly will have by the beginning of the session in January, we'll see what bills there are to be introduced or that have been introduced, basically. There's certain bills that may not appear quite yet because they're waiting additional sponsors. The House has a longer period of time to do that. Everything in the Senate will be done and already, and we can see if there are any bills that would lend themselves to being added to or expanded with some of our priorities, if any. And we could look at that the first of the year. And from the Senate side, I'll certainly do that, and hopefully one of the House members will do it from their side.
So would it make sense then to put that on our January agenda? January 8th is our next meeting, Senator.
Well, I guess you can see what bills might be, but the thing that's really important is what do we want to be able to introduce, and somebody's got to ought to be leading on that, and hopefully, preferably not me. In terms of what you want to get done, what you want to add, based on we can go and we can find here are the bills that are out that have some nexus to what we want, and then. Clearly, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to go to the committees of jurisdiction and talk about the issues and our priorities and so on. But translating that into action, that's going to be more difficult at this stage because unless there's something that's actionable to begin with, that's already there, and that we'll know by the end of the month, I think.
And I do think I know there are certain. There's a wetlands bill out there, there's a river corridor bill out there, there's a riparian study commission out there. I know Julie was talking about the emergency response loan fund as something that may still be in the works. Same with the flood resilient communities fund and Vermont. So I think there are bills out there, but we need to solidify that with our action plan. Representative Dolan, saw your hand up.
I did, but the senator said what I was going to say, in that we'll have a better idea of the additional bills that will be introduced. I think that the July floods certainly had spurred quite a bit of thinking, I think, in both chambers about resilience and how do we achieve that. That's going to drive down the risk to public health and safety, as well as the cost of recovery. We also, I know a bill that I have on the wall is with respect to a sustainable fund for invasive species management. And then we know that every year we look at the important fund, the outdoor recreation grant program called VORAC. And I think one of the priorities specified here in the action plan talks about, and I think something that we learned about during the COVID pandemic was the inequity surrounding access to open space. And one of the action items speaks to equitable public access. So I wanted to just, when I heard the Senator talk about, let's see what happens in January. We'll have I think a more complete understanding of at least what's on the walls or what's being introduced pertaining to these priorities.
Wayne?
Yeah, Karina, just a question, I guess maybe for the legislators, it totally makes sense. If we wait until our January meeting, I guess to, put an approach strategy together and look at some tentative dates, I'm assuming the end of January, early February to get into certain bills and committees, is that too late? Because I know we've done a great job this year getting ahead of it by where we're at, and this is the reason why we haven't waited. So just wondering if that timing works or it doesn't work, or we need to figure that out now ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if I may, and perhaps Carol will speak up as well, but many of the initiatives over the years have been long-term initiatives, long-term goals and objectives of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Restoration of Lake Champlain. And so while we are entering the second of a biennium, often it's this long-term information presented at the legislature to raise awareness about some of the clean water challenges, whether it be pesticide-related invasive species clogging recreational values or even affecting property values with algal blooms, or whether it be relating to climate resilience when we experience severe weather events and the impact that has on our communities and our economy. So I think it behooves us to certainly see, to the extent to which we have bills, as the Senator had mentioned, there are bills that are aligned with these priorities. It's always good and helpful to show where we've fallen short this year and where we could continue to educate ourselves being the greater body of both chambers, and learn from the CAC and better understand what, from your all's perspective, should be the ongoing priorities.
Yeah, I would have to say Senator Brock and Representative Dolan have covered it completely.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I have a dog barking in the background because there's someone plowing our driveway. Finally. So my apologies for that. No, those are really great points. And I think it would be great if we can get, I think we could present in January just to stay ahead of things. But if it goes into February, I think that's okay too.
Well, I still think the sooner the better. In any second year of a biennium, things get really busy really fast. The budget adjustment process is more or less a softball when it comes to our time management on priorities. It's the a real challenge to kind of address all the priorities coming at us, trying to get a budget done. And so I think that it just gets that much more and more difficult for us to fully get educated to know over the long term what the legislature should be thinking about with respect to half the state draining into the lake.
And I'm just wondering, do we want to identify who is interested in presenting at this point in time, or is that something we can do via email? How should we handle that, Katie? I'm looking to you.
I think if folks know now that they want to be involved, that would be helpful to know. And if some people need a little bit more time to think about it, we can follow up over email, but it'll just be helpful for planning. And usually we do 1 or 2 small group meetings in advance to go through talking points and things like that. So it'll just be helpful to get those kinds of things on calendars. So if you're
Sure,
interested in presenting, yeah.
Sure, as I have many years, I'm interested in presenting, Bob Fisher. And to clarify, the last week in January is only the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. After that, I'm open.
Thanks, Bob. Who else is interested?
I'm interested too.
Senator Brock?
Just a question of, on the House side, who's the chair of the committee of jurisdiction here? You know?
Amy Sheldon, probably with the Energy, Environment and Energy Committee.
And are you on that committee, Representative Dolan?
No, I'm on appropriations.
Okay, who's on that committee? Any member of our group on that committee?
No.
Oh.
Good question, but.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that somebody, it'd be useful to just have a conversation with Amy at this point, just to talk about the notion that, well, this committee would like to present to them when would be the best time and what bill or bills are coming up that would be appropriate for us to have a role in. And to know that before we even go into session, and I will do the same with Senate Natural Resources and Energy, just to get the preparation laid now. That's, basically a phone call at this point.
Maybe an email. Amy's on vacation, I think, right now. but that's a great idea.
That is.
Yeah, Senator Brock, if you can help with that on the Senate side,
Yeah,
that
I'll
would
make the
be
calls on my side.
recommended.
That leads me to a question I think that came up, Katie, when Denise and we were talking earlier this week, but are we clear on who our legislative representatives are? Like, should we have someone from House Natural Resources on our committee? And I think there was an outstanding question about that.
Well,
Be
I'd
helpful.
like to say that we have, Carrie was on it most recently, and I was on it. Carrie's on it for a long time, so was I. And we are always in contact with Amy Sheldon, who's the chair of the committee. And I know I continue to work with that committee even now, so.
Yeah, I think the question that came up when I was sending out the what's it called? The invitations to the action plan rollout meeting was, so to my knowledge, Senator Bray is on the committee still, but perhaps that's changed. And Carol and I talked about that.
Yeah.
Is he not?
I don't believe so. I thought he was coming off it, but I may be wrong.
Okay, I haven't heard anything, and then I saw that on Senator Martine LaRogulic's page that the CAC was listed under her committees, but then when Carol had reached out to her, she said she wasn't on this committee. So I think there's a little bit of confusion around who the other Senate representative is on the committee.
And how do we go about clarifying that?
Hold on, Ginny Lyons is on this committee, isn't she?
No, I don't think so.
She came off right before I
Quite a while.
started.
Quite a while. I think Chris Bray replaced her, and then I know Chris was looking.
That's right.
I think was
Chris.
anticipating coming off, but I don't know precisely when.
Yeah.
And, see if I can find online if he's been replaced. I'll just take a look while we're talking.
Okay, and just to stay on schedule, thank you, Senator Brock, for looking into that. I think that should cover our legislative presentation. I think the only other thing I had in my notes is that we plan to distribute this action plans in hard copy. And I don't know if there's happy to help with that effort, Katie, if you print them out, if there's more to be printed.
Yeah, Sarah and I talked about that this morning, so we're going to get some of those printed, and I know there was interest in sticking one in every legislator's mailbox, so we'll do that when we get to the State House.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think with that, we can turn it over to Ryan Mitchell, who is the Communications and Publications Coordinator for the Lake Champlain Basin Program. Oh, I see Sarah's hand is up.
Thanks. Just quickly, it sort of sounded like we touched on it in terms of asking who's interested in presenting, but Katie and I were talking about scheduling and just wanted to make sure that there aren't any dates that we should try to avoid for planning the meetings with the committees and some of the Secretary and Governor leadership.
I think, yeah, Bob said the 22nd through the 24th, is that right? The first 3 days.
Thank you.
Last, okay. But yeah, if there are any other dates that you all become aware of, please email me as soon as you can.
Well, know that Mondays is on the House side, the only committee that meets on Mondays is the Appropriations Committee. So you'll really be focusing on Tuesday, Wednesday, if you were to pick that week.
Great, thank you.
And I guess we didn't finish, and my fault, but we didn't finish getting a list of who is interested. I know Bob said he was. Wayne has his hand up. I have my hand up. Hillary has her hand up. So that's a good start. Perfect. Okay, I will hand it over to Ryan. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Karina, and thank you all for having me tonight. I'm going to share my screen here. You all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and you see the main title slide there? Great. Thanks again. So I'm Ryan Mitchell. As Karina said, I'm the Communications and Publications Coordinator for the Basin Program. And I'm with you tonight presenting as the project lead for the survey for the Basin Program. But there were a number of other folks who really did the bulk of the work, including the 4 listed here who were the PIs for the project and did most of the work developing the survey, actually implementing it, and then doing analysis of the data they collected. It was a tremendous amount of work, and we're very grateful to all the work they did. So in addition to Lori, Jane, Michael, and Christine, we also had a survey advisory committee of about a dozen people who were involved early on in the process to inform the development of the survey and make sure we were looking at things from a variety of perspectives, a variety of organizations, perspectives and demographics and geography and whatnot. So these folks all contributed their time voluntarily, so we thank them as well. So why a survey? Why a public awareness survey? The Basin Program and our partners and a lot of other folks do quite a bit of work around education and communications and outreach, and it's been part of the Basin Program's mission since we started in 1990, and it's continued on to this day. So, we're doing everything. We have multiple websites on social media. We're doing print publications, the State of the Lake Report, which most of you folks are probably familiar with, is a sort of our flagship print piece. But we do a number of other things. Colleen, who's pictured there in the bottom left, and some of our education and outreach staff are doing a ton of work in schools, at camps, public events throughout the basin, as are, again, a number of our partners. The Lawn to Lake initiative there has been an initiative going on, I think, since the mid 2000s. That's a multiple partnership project looking to change people's behavior around phosphorus fertilizers, raising the blade, whatnot. So there's a lot of work going on. And one of the challenges with education and outreach work is how do we assess this? How do we know if we're moving the dial, if we're making any progress on people's understanding of the issues in the lake, the challenges, the opportunities to get involved and contribute in their actions as well. A number of organizations do surveys after specific outreach events or follow up within 6 months to sort of gauge what people have learned from those events and how that might have changed their perspectives or their behavior around the lake and other environmental issues. But in terms of getting sort of a long-term picture of people's understanding and behavior, we decided we wanted to do this sort of broad-scale, watershed-wide survey of not just awareness. My title slide referenced the public awareness survey, but it's really kind of a traditional knowledge, attitudes, and practice survey, or knowledge, attitudes, and engagement. And those are really the big goals for the survey. Really, again, trying to gauge people's knowledge of watershed issues, as well as things like where to get information or how to get involved, those kinds of things, as well as their attitudes toward water quality and toward the lake, the degree to which they value the lake and its importance in their lives. And then going one step further and looking at the action or engagement, how they're getting involved, the things they're doing, volunteering in the community or doing things in their homes or businesses that will help improve water quality. So those were the primary goals. We were also looking to get a little bit of information about where people are getting their information in terms of different communications channels, different organizations, with the idea ultimately of taking all those things and targeting very intentionally specific audiences and specific communications channels, trying to be a little bit more strategic and effective in how we target folks in our outreach messaging. So just some basics around the survey. So the survey development process started sometime in 2020, but the actual survey was implemented in summer and early fall of 2021. So not quite the height of the COVID pandemic, but certainly certain things still influenced by that, I think. So that's something to keep in mind. So again, the survey was basin-wide, Vermont, New York, and Quebec, folks in the basin, in those respective jurisdictions. And so they were randomly selected from lists of emails that were acquired by the folks at UVM and Center for Rural Studies, and randomly emailed the survey in Vermont and New York. In Quebec, provincial law, as I understand it, prohibits that kind of contact. So they actually had to get actual mail addresses, email them information about the survey, and there was a link to take the survey online. So it was sent out in 1,675 responses. That was about the target that the team was looking for to ensure proper representativeness and level of confidence and level of accuracy. And so they did reach a 95% confidence interval with a 5% margin of error for those who are really statistics geeks. I only have a basic knowledge of statistics, so I took their word for it. The survey consisted of 36 questions. Some of those questions were actually multiple part questions. So some questions had sort of 15 pieces to it, 15 questions or things that they were getting at. So it was a pretty extensive survey. I think it took about 20, 25 minutes on average to complete. So we were fortunate to get the kind of response we had, and are grateful for people taking the time to do that, because it was a certain investment of time. The team generated a 147-page final report. There's a ton of information in this. We ended up producing, and maybe some of you folks have seen, it's a 4-page summary of that report, which is really whittling down a lot of information, pages and pages and pages of charts and tables and statistic analysis. So again, they really did do a lot of work. So jumping in a little bit to some of the demographic background of the respondents, which again plays into sort of our understanding of the survey results and the analyses. As you can see here, the age did skew a little bit older. I don't know the percentages. It's looking like probably about 60% over the age of 55. So I think that's probably a factor, or it could be a factor of many things, but just the way we reached out to folks, or I should say the way they reached out to folks and the way people were responding. Doing it again, we might look for other avenues to get people to the survey, whether that's social media or other means. We'll have to give that some thought. In terms of geographic distribution, you can see there New York at 382 was the sort of the smallest pool of respondents, and that was actually a challenge to get to that number. They ended up having to acquire a second list of emails to send out to people because they did not have a high enough response rate. So in order to get to that level of confidence or that margin of error, they had to send out a second mailing to get to the 382. But a fairly representative, they were confident that it was, statistically representative of the populations in each of the 3 jurisdictions. Home ownership, just over 9 out of 10 of the respondents own their own home. About roughly 10% are renters, which factors into certain behaviors that people may or may not be partaking in. Something else to keep in mind. Residential setting, not surprisingly, the majority or about half anyway were in rural areas, given the rural nature of the watershed. That's not surprising. Education is a fairly educated group of folks. Again, perhaps a factor of the fact that it was an older audience, but it's hard to know for sure. So moving on to some of the findings, some of the good stuff, values and attitudes, people's perspectives and the value they place on the lake. So there's obviously a high value placed on clean water. You can see the numbers there. So the way these questions were phrased were from strongly agree, no feeling, disagree, strongly disagree, and don't know. And so 85.8% either agreed or strongly agreed that healthy waterways are a critical part of the thriving communities. 96% agreed or strongly agreed that addressing water quality should be a priority, and same for town budgets there. So clearly, clean water is a priority to folks in the basin, which is not surprising and reassuring. Reasons folks gave in another question for the value of clean water was just a healthy environment, the fact that water is so essential to life, clean drinking water and swimming water, recreation and tourism. So kind of expected values placed on water, clean water in the basin. I rely on Lake Champlain for my well-being. Again, a lot of people closely relate to the lake and its value in their lives and its value in their communities. So we asked questions. Many of the questions were asked both about Lake Champlain and then local water bodies. Since this was, again, a watershed-wide survey, a lot of people relate more closely to the water body in their town, which could be many miles from the lake. So a lot of the questions were framed in that way. In this graph, you can see that folks were generally pretty well divided on whether Lake Champlain is clean or not. About 50-50 there. You can see it on the bottom end. The very unclean was a little bit more than the very clean at the top. Generally speaking, folks feel their local water body is cleaner than Lake Champlain. People also recognize the impact of their behaviors and their actions on the lake and water quality, both in Lake Champlain and again in water bodies throughout the basin. Moving on to knowledge and awareness, what folks know about water quality issues and where to get information, those kinds of things. one way we asked a number of questions to get at sort of the knowledge piece of it. One of them was sort of self-reporting on their knowledge of what a watershed is. And so generally speaking, a little more than half are pretty confident they know what a watershed is and can explain it to others. Other folks, not quite so much. So, you know, this shows some level of knowledge of watershed. Again, it is self-reporting. It's not a pop quiz of any sort that there's, you know, clearly a right or wrong answer, but it gives us a sense of where people stand. Oops. All right. This was an interesting question. So this was actually based on one of the figures of in the State of the Lake report from 2021, which I'll show you in just a second. But asking people their understanding on a scale of 0 to 10, the relative impact of these different activities and land uses on cyanobacteria blooms. And so you can see their agricultural land is not quite up to 8 out of 10 on the scale. Wastewater treatment facilities come in actually higher than developed land and higher than wetlands and forested land as well, which this is interesting because if you look at the modeling that's been done, which is reflected in the figure from the State of the Lake report, if you look up here, just 6% of phosphorus loading to the lake comes from wastewater treatment facilities, whereas 16% comes from developed land, and actually a significant amount just does come from forest land, just because phosphorus is a naturally occurring nutrient that comes off the landscape in even undeveloped areas. So just going back to that previous slide where folks generally, not by a lot, but generally gave wastewater treatment a little bit more impact than developed land. And again, this is another one that there's not a clear right or wrong answer. I think folks could spend quite a bit of time trying to determine which of these has a greater impact on the health of waterways. But in this version of the survey, we're really just looking for a feeling of people's understanding of the issues and what they see as being the biggest issues. So not surprisingly, ag farming and runoff from developed landscapes are the top two. And there's some overlap, and some of these are related. Pollution and contaminants obviously come from both of those. A couple of others that are not on here. Climate change was actually on there at a slightly lower percent than other there at the bottom. I think that was about 2.7% of people reported this as being a serious impact. And I should say these were, as opposed to a multiple choice or strongly disagree or agree, these were actually open responses. So people wrote in what they felt were the biggest challenges, and folks at UVM and Center for Rural Studies categorized those and put them into these categories. So looking at knowledge and awareness from a little bit different perspective, how well people know where to get information, how to get involved. You can see some of the numbers for the strongly disagree at the top, or I'm sorry, the strongly agree at the top, aren't necessarily as high as we might like them. If you look at strongly agree and somewhat agree, it's better. But in terms of knowing things to reduce water pollution, it's, I think about 27% of people strongly agree that they know things they can do to reduce water pollution. And sort of similar trends actually getting a little bit lower for finding information about protecting water, and then about efforts in their community, knowing how to get involved in their community to protect or improve water. So a little bit of work, I think, to be done there in terms of overall awareness of how to get involved in things you can do. Okay, and then looking at how some of this translate into action on the ground, and actually we'll start a little bit backwards and just looking at how people prefer to find out or get information or learn about water quality issues. And this was kind of a cross-tab analysis looking at each of these different sort of communications channels or platforms and breaking it down by age. And I know that's probably pretty difficult to read on your screen there. But some of the findings were a little surprising. So we looked both at preferred ways of learning, but also how people are currently getting their information. And traditional media came out pretty high in both of those. Newspapers, radio, TV broadcast news ranked fairly high on both of those. But you can see things like websites, video on website, TV or radio station are all pretty close across age groups and also all ranked pretty high in the way people are getting information and prefer to get information. You'll see some not surprising results down here for social media. This older age group, 75 and up, that's their least preferred probably way of getting information. Same with podcasts and also educational field trips, which I guess that makes sense. But you can see in all three of those, there is a statistically significant difference in their interest in getting information in those ways. So this way of looking at the data, of looking at sort of two different variables and comparing to them is a very valuable way to look at it. And they did quite a bit of this analysis, sort of looking at these questions by age group and then also by geography. Looking at a suite of behaviors that they asked about in terms of how frequently people engage in those behaviors, from very often down to never. And this is kind of looking at it from bottom up, maybe, so to speak, and just looking at the things that people are not doing to get a sense of where maybe a little bit more work could be done. So you can see in the bottom there, getting soil tests before applying phosphorus fertilizers to their lawns, excuse me, which is now required by law in Vermont and New York, except in certain circumstances, and participating in invasive species removal projects, which, to be fair, there aren't a whole lot of those opportunities, aside from the general clean, drain, dry messaging and cleaning boats to prevent spread of invasive species. So another way of looking at just a few of these behaviors, and again, looking at them by age, disposal of toxic materials, not using salt on your driveways or limiting the use of salt on your driveways, and then the clean, drain, dry, and breaking it down by different age categories in terms of always, often, sometimes, or never doing each of those behaviors. And I would say generally the youngest age group there, the 18 to 34, is the least frequent people to partake in those behaviors. And in some cases that makes sense. I'm trying to remember actually if there was, some of the questions had opportunity to opt out or say NA because, for example, you don't own a boat or a watercraft, so you can't clean invasive species. The last 3 years, have you done any of the following specifically to reduce runoff? So again, looking at people's behavior in the past for very specific behaviors and ways of engaging. So some of those are not surprising. Replacing paved or concrete driveway or walkway is an investment of time, money, and energy assisted in waterway cleanup. I guess that one I found a little surprising. I thought maybe more folks would be doing that. But again, lots of interesting results in the survey. And then this sort of suite of behaviors is geared a little bit more towards engagement in the community as opposed to specific actions taken, say, on your yard or on your business. Looking at the degree to which people are involved in their community. You can see the numbers there. Quite a few folks are politically active in supporting water quality through voting for specific candidates or initiatives. A number of people are doing water quality assessment, volunteer water quality assessment in their communities, donating money, attending a meeting about water quality, participating in a water quality improvement project, which gets a little bit back to the previous slide, which was more specific behaviors. So what the team did was created an action index using this last set of behaviors around engagement in the community to sort of start to create a score for how much engagement, how much action people are taking. And so the way this works is they looked at those 6 behaviors, and on the y-axis there is the percentage of people who took either 0 through 6 of those behaviors, or participated in 0 through 6 of those behaviors. So you can see there 1 is clearly the highest, which is fairly low in terms of the number of people who are taking these actions. So just above, what, 53, 54%. And those highest categories, 4, 5, and 6, just about 10% of folks are really taking a lot of actions, are really involved. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit more about those crosstab analyses I mentioned, looking at a couple of different variables in relation to one another. And so trying to look at the level of knowledge related to the degree that people are involved in taking action or aware of issues, and using that test of whether folks know watersheds or not. And again, it is a sort of a self-reporting test. So you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt, but does generally show that folks who are more knowledgeable about watersheds are more active. I guess that's probably not surprising. There's a correlation there, if not a causation. But across the board, those folks who know about watershed are doing things in their community, taking specific actions and behaviors. So this was an interesting, I thought, perspective as well. So I mentioned that one of the ways that they were doing these crosstabs, or these multi-factor sort of relations, was by geography. And so the chart on the left there is looking at difference in attitudes towards water quality in the lake based on distance from the lake. And there's 2 classes there. There are folks who live less than 2 miles from the lake, which is the closest of 4 categories that they did this analysis with. So the closest to the lake, and then the second is greater than 21 miles from the lake. So this is the farthest reaches from the lake. And so you can see that the folks closest to the lake, perhaps not surprisingly, place the most value on the lake and on water quality and their feelings about whether or not it's clean. Conversely, they looked at the distance from the lake and the level of action or knowledge of folks. And it's, for the most part, reversed here, where the folks further from the lake are taking more actions or are more generally involved. Which is surprising to us, or to me anyway. I think, you know, we talk a lot about trying to target folks up in the watershed to help them understand that, you know, their homes, their activities and behaviors are tied to Lake Champlain, just by virtue of the fact that runoff from up in the watershed eventually makes its way to Lake Champlain. So these numbers were a little surprising. Chatting with some folks, I think it was actually folks from some of the watershed organizations in the basin, thought maybe this was a result of all the great work that the watershed groups are doing out in the basin to educate people about water quality in their communities and on their local waterways. And so, you know, this might be a reflection. I'm not sure, you know, what that says, if there needs to be more activity by groups closer to the lake. Not really sure what to make of it, but I thought it was interesting to share. So just wanted to mention quickly, as I said, this did include respondents from Vermont, New York, and Quebec. And it was interesting across the board. The Quebecois seemed to be more knowledgeable, more engaged, participating more in actions and behaviors. And here you can see those who strongly agreed that they knew what actions to take are, you know, significantly higher in Quebec than Vermont and New York. And so this was kind of the case across the board for many of the questions. And then likeliness to take one of 15 actions to address water quality in the future. For 12 of those 15 actions that were surveyed, folks in Quebec were more likely to take those actions than folks in Vermont and New York. And so these two slides really focus on action, but again, it was sort of pretty common throughout, whether you're talking about just knowledge of issues, where to find information, and those kinds of things. So it was interesting to know. So moving on, I mentioned the goals at the beginning of the presentation, but looking a little bit at how we plan or are using the results of the survey, and we are using it, both the basic program and a number of partners moving forward, which of course is the idea. One of the things the Basin program is doing is, so we're working on the 2024 version of the State of the Lake report. This is the ecosystem indicator scorecard that looks at a variety of water quality and ecosystem and habitat indicators in terms of the status and trends in the basin. So we're working to get some of the information from the survey into this upcoming version of the State of the Lake report. It won't yet make it into the indicator scorecard. My hope is that in the future it does. The plan for the survey is to repeat it every 4 or 5 years, so we can start to get a gauge of how we may or may not be moving the dial. And so we actually have proposed a proposal in our next budget for more money to redo the survey in 2025. So I'm really excited to see the results of that and compare the numbers and see if and how things are changing. So we're also looking at the results from a strategic communications standpoint. I'm actually working on a plan for the Basin program now. And one of the things that I think is interesting is you look at those numbers, and as you sort of move through a continuum of just sort of general values around the lake and water quality through knowledge and awareness and into action, you can see those numbers steadily decline. So as we're thinking a little bit more strategically about communications and how we ultimately get to more action, more behavior change in the basin, is starting to look at that continuum and how we might progress people along and targeting different folks who have a different level of knowledge and different level of engagement in slightly different ways, and specifying messaging around those different folks. If you're at all familiar with marketing, folks in marketing talk about a customer journey or marketing funnel, where you move down and you have fewer folks who are sort of engaged and actually ultimately buy the product. So it's sort of the same thinking, and trying to move people along that continuum, along that journey from being knowledgeable to taking behavior change. And this is something that folks who are doing social marketing, which is a very specific way of addressing behavior change that really focuses on people's barriers and motivations for certain behaviors, is finding that just knowledge and awareness isn't necessarily translating to behavior change. So there are some very intensive efforts to get folks to make those behavior changes. So we're starting to think in those terms moving forward. So recommendations that the team made, both for the Basin program and for other folks working in education and outreach throughout the watershed, including some of our close partners, working again with those traditional media that really showed to be, at least again with the group of respondents in this survey who did skew a little bit older, those traditional forms of media, newspapers, radio, TV, did score fairly high. And so the Basin program is starting to re-energize some of our work around engaging with the media and developing some efforts to reach out, make story suggestions, help educate some of the reporters, and those kinds of initiatives to help improve, or not improve, but increase media coverage. Developing short informational documents from the State of the Lake report. So back a number of years ago, we used to produce a small newspaper insert, which was I forget, it was before my time in the Basin program, actually. So it's going back 11 or 12 years at least. But it was a shorter 8-page summary that was sent out in newspaper inserts of the State of the Lake report. And so this is something we're looking at doing again. We're not sure if it will be a newspaper insert or just some shorter summary document that is distributed maybe just in one way by newspapers, but also in other locations as well. Highlighting efforts in local communities, helping people to know what's going on in their community and how to get involved. We're looking at a number of ways to do this in terms of social media and video work. The Don't Pee on the Lawn initiative, again, this was the one that started, I think, around 2004, 2005. Lori Fisher, Lori's not on the line today, so she can't correct me, but it was a multi-partner effort looking at getting folks to reduce the amount of phosphorus fertilizers they were using on their lawn. And so one of the things that came out of the survey was to sort of reinvigorate that initiative, partly based on that one slide I showed you that showed that most folks are not testing their lawn for phosphorus before applying fertilizers. And I don't know if we got a handle on separately whether they're actually using PP fertilizer or not, but the feeling was that it's something we could do. And then the final one there is select a suite of practices that are likely to have the most impact. So things that people can do at home, and identifying the things that are going to be most impactful. So this is something we're looking at, is doing a little bit of research in terms of, what are the things? Is it not applying for phosphorus fertilizer? Is it raising the blade on your lawnmower so grass can be longer, improving soil health and whatnot? And then trying to focus on those behaviors going forward that will have the most impact. So that's all I have for you tonight. Again, there's a lot of information. Actually, I did not include a link to the report in the summary document. I'll put that in the chat as you all are wrapping up your meeting, but I'm happy to take any questions now.
Hi, this is Bob Fisher. Thank you for that excellent presentation. And as someone that runs to the second largest wastewater system in the state, clearly we need to do more work because your perceptions versus reality. Thank you.
Yes, and that's something there is a figure in the State of Lake report that actually shows very explicitly how those reductions at wastewater facilities have gone down over the years. And so we're talking about options for maybe reworking that graphic a little bit to maybe tell that story a little bit better and increase people's understanding of that fact. So
Yes.
I see Wayne has his hand up.
Yeah, Ryan, quick question. There were some slides where showed the younger age group kind of seemed to be a lower percentage as far as their habits and some of those things. Any suspicion as to why that is? I always kind of think, you guys do a great job with the schools, with the kids, and well, maybe not all, but some portion of the age group probably has young kids that kind of bring that home and, field trips and activities. So it's kind of a little surprised to see the results, I guess, for that younger age group.
yeah, we were a little surprised too. It's hard to say, if we had, well, I mean, it is capturing that age group, but I'm wondering if we, reached out to folks in different ways to get a higher response rate in that age group, if that might affect the numbers at all. But no, it's not something we have a great handle on. And we're starting to think in terms of different ways of targeting those, looking at social media options, and of course being a popular channel with those groups. So
can I throw in an idea?
Oh, Chris is here. Great. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Chris Stepanek with Lake Champlain Sea Grant, one of the folks who was working on the survey. Ryan, great job with presenting the results. Just a thought in terms of the list that we used to email people. So we purchased that from a data company, and it's possible that the people who are offering their emails through whatever source that company uses tend to be older. So while we had emails and we used an electronic survey for at least the folks in the US, I think you can see that it's skewed in terms of that kind of older demographic. And then in Quebec, just a reflection on one of the things that you mentioned, Ryan, that the people in Quebec are were expressing that they are doing more actions for the environmental benefit. And I think that that reflects on the fact that we mailed it to them and then they had to take some kind of an action to use the link that we sent and then go in, and versus just getting an email and easily being able to click on a link that was present. So I think you're getting the people who are more active simply because of the way that we distributed the survey.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Chris. Glad you're on to clarify some of those points for me. I wish I knew you were on.
Sorry, I'm hiding over here.
No, that's all right. I'm glad to have you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Ryan, really great job. Really interesting. I guess I have a comment and a question. My comment is one way that we found at VNRC that's been very helpful as far as communications is short video clips. I don't know if that was a recommendation that you've gotten, but just sort of trying to distill some of this into some short videos might be a good way to share it. And then my question is whether there's sort of there's so much here, but it would be great to have some of this distilled for talking points to share with the legislators, and wondering if such a document exists. But this is really, really great information.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's a 4-page summary, which is a very brief summary of the really comprehensive work that Chris and their team did, that I can share with you. And then within the full report itself, there is a number of recommendations and key findings from the report that provide a little bit more focus right at the beginning of the report. So again, I'll put links to both of those in the chat. And then in terms of short video, yes, absolutely. I don't think it was a specific recommendation of the survey report, but it is definitely a trend that we're hearing and seeing everywhere, that there's very short video clips on social media and websites are the way to go. So we're actually, as we're going along with new video projects, getting shorter pieces, and then we're also going back to our video library to try to pull really short 30-second, 45-second clips from those longer form video pieces to use in social media. So yeah, definitely a good point. Thanks.
And I'm guessing you're able to share the presentation with us as well.
Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ryan?
Okay, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a discussion on membership, and I guess I'll just brief you on the conversation that Katie and Denise and I had last week. We had sort of come up with a plan as far as after the public meeting, we got a lot of membership interest, which was great. But wanting to have like an equitable approach to recruitment and sort of an organized plan. So we had sort of thought to to provide sort of an organized outreach to the public as far as recruiting people, and have a deadline of late February for submission, and then a plan of March 8th to review those submissions of letter of interest and resume, and then those sort of have a subgroup that looks at those and share those with everyone, and then those that we recommend, the committee, to then have those folks move forward with submitting their application. I believe that maybe that has changed. Sarah, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, if you're still available.
I'm still a bit, yeah, I'm here. And Katie and I chatted this afternoon about this proposed approach. And I haven't had a chance to find out if that would work or not. I think my question is just whether or not maybe there should be a tweak where the ask is for interested parties to apply and send the CAC their applications, versus kind of creating an additional step in the process, because ultimately the governor recommends these members. So that's just a question that I have to ask. If if this, how you phrased it, would work, or if they need to apply formally as well. And that's a way to kind of meet both needs.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we had, we'd pulled up, Katie made a nice PowerPoint of just some of the membership, like what we're missing as far as membership. Oh, thank you, Katie. Maybe I'll let you go over this.
Yeah, so this just comes from the membership audit we did earlier this year, and these were the areas that the CAC identified as not currently being represented on the committee or not well enough represented. So I'll share, after I share this for a minute, sort of the draft recruitment document that I have been sharing so far, and we can talk about whether or not we want to add sort of desired expertise or experience along with that while we're doing the more broad outreach for these open positions. And the numbers next to the different things on here, just how many people had made a comment about that item being missing from the committee. Sarah?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, and I also forgot to mention, I'm gonna just double check that advertising it publicly is appropriate in my inquiry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anyone have comments on this slide that Katie's showing and the process as we've sort of laid it out, contingent upon what Sarah finds out?
I have one question, if I may. What is the are we actually short of members on the CAC? How many spots are we talking about here to ideally fill?
I believe it's 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have 2 vacancies.
Great.
And it's my understanding that in the past, sort of when someone stepped down, they helped recommend a replacement, which maybe that hasn't happened with the past 2 that have stepped down. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That sounds right to me, but I have not been involved long enough to know if that's been the case. Yeah, and the folks also suggested some names for potential members. So I think if the more public outreach is not appropriate, then at least some targeted outreach to some folks that we've already.
Yeah, hi, this is Bob Fisher. I don't see great NGO representation. I mean, obviously you have Lori Fisher. I would reach out to the CLF Lakekeeper personally to get another perspective. Thank you.
Bob, did you mean reach out to the CLF Lakekeeper to see if they are interested in joining, or to
Correct.
identify?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's or potentially other avenues in that way. I don't want to give more weight than one to the other, but it does say municipal, and I think me and Wayne kind of have some municipal representation there. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
So I'll reshare this with the meeting follow-up materials. Can you see the Word document now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is what I'd been sharing, just some background on the committee, which comes from the member manual. So none of that should be new information. The responsibilities listed here also come from the member manual, where I could use all of your help since I am not a member of this committee is the time commitment, but I figured generally, you know, the meetings are 2 hours once a month, and then, you know, some meeting prep and follow-up. I estimated that at the 3-hour per month commitment, plus additional time for other committee roles, so work on the action plan and things like that. Some notice of the per diem that members are eligible for, and then this is just the application process without those deadlines that we just discussed, but asking folks to review the member manual, to submit a resume and brief letter of interest to me, which I'll share with the committee. And also I separated this into 2 bullets now, and previously had it, you know, submit your application following the committee's recommendation, but just have that as a separate bullet that they should do both things concurrently. Submit their application, and then the committee, and this is all contingent on what Sarah finds out also, but committee can submit their endorsement for prospective members to the Agency of Natural Resources and the governor, and I assume those will be taken into consideration in the final selection. And then this is some very broad criteria for membership that I have used with the New York CAC. And we can talk about if we want to include desired qualifications or leave it broad.
That looks really good to me, Katie.
I just want to thank you for spending this time and thinking about that and representation. I think all of us on the committee and those that have come before have always focused at the larger picture. They may have these expertise or interests. I would hate to have us go down a path of just focusing too narrowly on what a new member could bring to the table. And I just mentioned that it's, you know, we really want to think about that long-term stewardship of the lake and the basin itself.
Other comments related to recruitment for our 2 vacant positions? So I guess looking forward to what Sarah finds out, because I do think we, you know, some of these folks that have reached out, we owe them a response of what we're going to do with their interest at some point. So looking forward to that, and from there, I guess we can also focus on how we're going to share the vacancies and reach out further for recruitment, if that makes sense. Senator Brock?
I just wanted to add, and it's slightly off topic, but part of this recruitment issue is the other Senate member of the committee is Senator Gulick from Chittenden County, and she was appointed to replace Senator Bray. I don't know if she's being copied on these meeting invitations at this point.
No, I think there's some confusion still, because I came across that as well, and Carol reached out to her and she said she was not on this committee, so
Right.
we're having some fun.
Right, then what I will do is I will follow up with the Senate Pro Tem and confirm it, but
Great.
Normally if she would appear on it, she's already been affirmed by the Committee on Committees.
Okay. Good to know.
So she may be on it whether she wants to be or not.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay.
Katie or Karina, was there any overlap between the list that was recommended by current members and the people who were interested in serving, or were they separate?
Hard to say without having received like a letter of interest from everyone. I think there's some overlap from what I know about a couple of people, but not necessarily like filling some of the bigger holes in the committee.
All right. Well, it's 6:45. This is meeting wrap-up time. Our next meeting is January 8th. And looking forward to, so I think we're still sort of compiling future meeting topics and working with Denise and Katie on that. I'm not sure if we have anything yet planned for the January 8th agenda, Katie.
I think what we learned today is that we'll probably talk about what in the legislature aligns with the CAC's priority that we can maybe push a little bit harder for during the presentations. And we had discussed plans to line up presentations according to the themes of the action plan. So depending on speaker availability and if anyone feels strongly about a particular topic, let me know and we can do our best to fill that in.
Great points. I think it makes sense to align our meetings with the themes of our action plan and as we can. All right. Any further comments? Well, I guess we get out early.